Hello there, my name is Payal Narayani and welcome to this video series. यहाँ हम कवर कर रहे हैं पूनम दलाल दहिया की एंशिएंट एंड मेडिवल इंडिया की 3rd एडिशन, जो कि लेटेस्ट एडिशन है. इस किताब को हम ट्रूली रीड करेंगे और जहाँ ज़रूरत पड़ेगी वहाँ हम साथ ही साथ UPSC एंड स्टेट सर्विसेज में आए हुए प्रीवियस ईयर के क्वेश्चंस भी डिस्कस करेंगे. एंड इस सीरीज़ में वीडियोज़ लगभग 30 to 35 मिनट्स के होंगे, बट इफेक्टिव होंगे. और हम ऑलमोस्ट 40 to 45 लेक्चर्स में ये पूरी किताब कवर करेंगे. और अगर आपने ये सीरीज़ 3 to 4 टाइम्स देख ली तो बिल्कुल ये किताब आपके दिमाग में छप जाएगी. एंड ट्रस्ट मी, आपकी एक्यूरेसी भी काफ़ी इंक्रीज़ हो जाएगी. साथ ही साथ आपका रिविज़न भी काफ़ी आसान हो जाएगा. सो अगर आपको रिविज़न के साथ साथ वैल्यू एडिशन भी करना है तो ये सीरीज़ पूरी फॉलो करें. आपको बस आपके पास ये किताब रखकर मुझे सुनना है एंड मोस्ट इम्पॉर्टेंट पॉइंट्स मार्क करने हैं. So without any further delay, let's get started. Hello there, welcome back to the channel Ghatna Sutra. यहाँ हम कवर कर रहे हैं पूनम दलाल दहिया की एंशिएंट एंड मेडिवल इंडिया 3rd एडिशन, जो कि लेटेस्ट एडिशन है. और हम आज शुरू कर रहे हैं विद द आर्मी फ्रॉम द चैप्टर लेटर मुगल, द मराठास एंड द अदर प्रोविंशियल किंगडम. So let's get started. Army. Shivaji was a military genius and his army was very well organized. The Marathas were pioneered of commando actions. The regular standing army known as Paga consisted of about 30,000 to 40,000 cavalry supervised by the Havaldars, who were given fixed salaries. The lowest head of the cavalry was called Nayak. In fact, all the war horses belonged to the state. There were 2 divisions in the Maratha cavalry. Bagris, equipped and paid by the state, and Shiladars, maintained by the nobles. Marathas were famous for guerrilla warfare, along with the use of innovative weapons. The Baghnaka, meaning tiger claws. The infantry was highly mobile and light, and the Malvi foot soldiers played an important role in infantry. Interestingly, at the time of exigencies, peasants also functioned as a part-time soldiers, as they used to work for 8 months in the field and performed war duties in 4 months. Shivaji also built a powerful navy for the purpose of guarding the Maratha ports, thereby checking piracy and collecting custom duties from the incoming and outgoing ships. In the military operations of the Marathas, the forts also played an important role. Each fort was put under the charge of 3 officers of equal rank: Subnis, Kardadar, Sarenobat, for mutual check and a precautious against treachery. Revenue. अब आप रेवेन्यू के टॉपिक को सिंगल स्टार मार्क कर लीजिए, क्योंकि इसके ऊपर UPPCS में 2003 में क्वेश्चन पूछा गया था. रेवेन्यू. आप रेवेन्यू के टॉपिक को सिंगल स्टार मार्क कर लीजिए, क्योंकि इसके ऊपर UPPCS में 2003 में क्वेश्चन पूछा गया था. राइट, सो लेट्स स्टार्ट. The revenue system of Shivaji was also largely based on that of Mughals and the Deccani state, such as that of Malik Ambar of Ahmednagar. Land was measured by using the measuring rod called lathi and were classified into 3 categories: paddy fields, garden lands, and hilly tracts. Shivaji drastically reduced the power of the existing Deshmukhs and Kulkarnis and appointed his own revenue officials called Karkuns. Shivaji strongly discouraged revenue farming. The Maratha employed a special script known as Modi script in the documents of the revenue and administrative record. Chaut and Sardeshmukhi were the 2 major sources of revenue, and it is interesting to note that the taxes were collected not in the Maratha kingdom but in the neighboring territories of Mughal Empire or Deccan Sultanate. So आप ये चौथ और सरदेशमुखी वाले टॉपिक को स्टार मार्क कर लीजिए एंड मार्क दिस इम्पॉर्टेंट, क्योंकि इसके ऊपर काफ़ी एग्जामिनेशंस में सवाल पूछे गए हैं, इंक्लूडिंग स्टेट सर्विसेज, एंड साथ ही UPSC की एग्जामिनेशन में भी इसके ऊपर सवाल आया था. राइट, सो चौथ एंड सरदेशमुखी. ठीक है, चौथ. 1/4 of the land revenue paid to the Marathas in order to avoid Maratha raids. Sardeshmukhi was additional leave of 10%, that is 1/10 of the standard land revenue on those lands on which the Maratha claimed hereditary rights. Bengal. डबल स्टार मार्क दिस टॉपिक, क्योंकि इसके ऊपर UPPCS में 2013 में सवाल आया था, साथ ही UPRO/ARO की एग्जामिनेशन में 2021 में इसके ऊपर सवाल आया था. Bengal. In 1705, Aurangzeb appointed Murshid Quli Khan as the governor of Bengal and later placed Orissa too under his authority. Murshid Quli Khan shifted capital from Dhaka to Murshidabad and, after the death of Aurangzeb, founded an independent state and became virtually independent, but kept on sending tributes to the Mughal emperor. After his death in 1727, his son-in-law Shujauddin started ruling Bengal. However, in 1739, Ali Khan deposed the family of Shujauddin and became the Nawab himself. The Nawab brought stability and peace to Bengal and at the same time promoted agriculture, trade and industry. During their reign, equal opportunities were given to both Hindus and Muslims in the administration, but the Nawab could not foresee the long-term implication of the presence of the European trading companies. Their ignorance of contemporary world affairs cost them a lot, as they were totally ignorant about the devastation caused by the Western trading companies in Africa and Latin America. Also, they neglected to build a strong army and failed to check the growing corruption among their officials. The foreign trading companies, especially English East India Company, took full advantage of their weakness and thus started interfering in their affairs. The successor of Ali Khan, Siraj-ud-Daulah, had to fight the English East India Company over the trading rights, and his defeat at the Battle of Plassey in 1757 paved the way for the subjugation of Bengal as well as India, the detail of which will be subsequently discussed in the last chapter. Awadh. The weakened control of the Mughals also resulted in the emergence of provincial kingdom of Awadh under the governor Shahadat Khan, popularly known as Burhan-ul-Mulk, who was an energetic, bold and intelligent ruler. He not only disciplined the rebellious zamindars but also improved the lot of peasants by levying equitable land revenue. His administration was efficient and troops were well paid, well armed and well trained. Before his death in 1739, Saadat Khan made his position hereditary. His successor, Safdar Jung and Asaf-ud-Daulah, not only played a very decisive role in the politics of northern India but also gave a long-term administrative stability to the Awadh province. Under the Nawabs, firstly Faizabad and then Lucknow emerged as a centre of cultural excellence comparable to Delhi in the sphere of art, literature and crafts. Regional architecture also reflected itself in the form of imambaras and certain other buildings. In fact, evolution of dance from Kathak was the outcome of this cultural synthesis. Punjab. Even though the Mughal forces suppressed the Sikhs under Banda Bahadur and later executed him, yet the Sikh resistance against the Mughal authority continued. After the invasion of Nadir Shah and Ahmad Shah Abdali, the Sikhs once again asserted their authority and organized themselves into 12 misls or confederacies, ruled by chiefs who exercised control over different parts of the kingdom. It was one such chief, Ranjit Singh of the Sukarchakia misl, who eventually welded these principalities into a large entity, lasting though for a brief time. He captured Lahore in 1799 and Amritsar in 1802. Later, he conquered Kashmir, Peshawar and Multan. His rise to power was based on superior military forces, partly serviced by European mercenaries, intelligent applications of the principles of statecraft and by the strategic location of his territories. It is said that he possessed the second best army in Asia, next only to English East India Company army. By 1809, he was the undisputed master of the most of Punjab. His effective rule lasted 4 decades, from 1799 to 1839. However, within 10 years of his death, the British annexed Punjab, the details of which, along with the annexation of Sindh, will be further discussed later in the last chapter. Rajputs. Rajput had proved to be the great support to the Mughals, especially in control of the peripheral areas. However, during the reign of Aurangzeb, the Mughal relation with Rajputs suffered, particularly over the issue of Aurangzeb's interference in the succession dispute of Marwar. His support to the rival candidate antagonized the Rajputs, and his occupation of Jodhpur further put a dent on the Mughal-Rajput relation, alienated the Rajputs totally from the Mughal rule. However, most of the later Rajput states, like the other regional states, were constantly involved in petty quarrels and civil wars. In fact, Ajit Singh of Marwar was killed by his own son. One of the principalities that came into prominence in the early 18th century was of Jaipur, earlier Amber, located in the eastern Rajasthan. Its remarkable ruler Savai Jai Singh 1699 to 1743. अच्छा, अब आप सवाई जय सिंह के टॉपिक को हाईलाइट कर लीजिए, क्योंकि इनके ऊपर UPPCS में 2014 में सवाल पूछा गया था, साथ ही RAS-RTS की एग्जामिनेशन में 2007 में सवाल आया था, एंड इट वाज रिगार्डिंग दी ऑब्जर्वेटरीज. और वो ऑब्जर्वेटरीज कहाँ लोकेटेड है? जयपुर, दिल्ली, मथुरा, उज्जैन एंड वाराणसी. ठीक है, सो लेट्स स्टार्ट. Savai Jai Singh, after whom Jaipur came to be named, was a distinguished statesman and a reformer. He tried to enforce a law to reduce lavish expenditure which a Rajput had to incur on daughters' marriage, which often indirectly resulted in female infanticide. Interestingly, he was a great astronomer and a man of science in an age when Indians were oblivious to scientific progress. He erected observatories with accurate and advanced instruments, some of them of his own invention, at Jaipur, Delhi, Mathura, Ujjain and Varanasi. He drew up a set of tables titled Zij Muhammad Shahi to enable people to make astronomical observations, and as a matter of fact, his own astronomical observations were remarkably accurate. He got translated Euclid's Element of Geometry into Sanskrit, along with Napier's work on construction and use of logarithms and other various work on trigonometry. But after his death, the second half of the 18th century was marked by an economic depression on account of series of crop failures in the 1750s and 60s, which further led to the decline of political powers of Jaipur, and it became a vulnerable target for the ambitions of the Maratha and of Maharji Sandhya in particular. Jats. The Jats were an agriculturist and pastoral caste who inhabited the region around Delhi, Agra and Mathura. Caste affinity with their zamindar brought soldiers within the community, and they began to revolt against the Mughal state from the times of Jahangir. In fact, the first revolt of the Jat peasants took place in 1669, and the emperor himself had to proceed to suppress the rebellion. Later, under the discontent of their peasant against Mughal state, local zamindar, first Gokala and then Rajaram and Choraman Jat, founded the Jat kingdom at Bharatpur. However, the Jat power reached its highest glory under the king Surajmal 1756 to 63, who consolidated the Jat power during his reign and compelled the Mughal authorities to recognize him. He was not only an extremely able administrator, wise statesman, but a great warrior too. He successfully withstood Ahmad Shah Abdali's army siege and supported the Marathas in the Third Battle of Panipat. He tried to centralize his power and bring key reforms in the administration by reducing the state's dependence on the overly mighty kinsmen, by raising an army with foreigners and introducing the Mughal system of revenue collection. But with his untimely death, there was a virtual collapse of Jat state. Rohilkhand and Farrukhabad. A couple of small Afghan kingdoms were also established in north of India following the weakening of Mughal Empire. The Afghans were a band of roving warlords who had initially started migrating to India from the 15th century. In the 18th century, due to political instability and economic dislocation in Afghanistan, Afghanis' migration to India increased. Also, the breakdown of authority in North India that followed Nadir Shah's invasion gave opportunity to another Afghan leader, Ali Muhammad Khan, to establish a small kingdom of Rohilkhand at the foothills of Himalayas between the Ganga in the south and Kumaon Hills in the north, with its capital at first at Alon in Bareilly and later at Rampur. But the new kingdom had hardly any influence, as it suffered heavily at the hands of stronger neighbouring powers like Awadh, the Jats and later the English. Another independent Afghan king to the east of Delhi in the area around Farrukhabad between Aligarh and Kanpur was established by Ahmad Khan Bagsha. अब जैसे कि हमने पहले भी डिस्कस किया है, वेन एवर वी टॉक अबाउट एनी ऑफ द किंगडम्स, ठीक है, आपको याद रखना होगा व्हेन दैट किंगडम एग्जिस्टेड, उनका टाइमलाइन क्या है, एंड हु इज़ द फाउंडर ऑफ दैट किंगडम. ठीक है, जैसे कि फरुखाबाद की इट्स अहमद खान बादशाह, ठीक है। During the reign of Farrukhsiyar and Muhammad Shah, both the Rohilas and Bagshas helped Ahmad Shah Abdali during the Third Battle of Panipat, but their power declined quickly as Abdali retired from the Indian stage, leaving Najibullah in charge of affairs at Delhi. South India. In the south, several states did make a determined effort during the period to consolidate their power by the use of access to sea and port. Principals among them were Travancore in Kerala under Martanda Varma and Rama Varma, Mysore under Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan. However, these states rose to prominence only in the later half of the 18th century, or at least after 1740 CE. Before them, there were three formidable powers in the south: the Marathas, who were present both at Tanjore and elsewhere; Sadullah Khan of Arcot or Carnatic, who had ruled Arcot Principality around the 1700s, and the Nizam ul Mulk of Hyderabad, who had consolidated his position at Hyderabad by 1740s. However, in the second half of the 18th century, the power of all three of these declined. The succession struggle at Arcot in 1740 and early 1750 emptied the state coffers, and its rulers succumbed to financial manipulation by private British merchants, to whom they were increasingly in debt for war expenses. Similarly, in 1750, after the death of its founder, Nizam ul Mulk, the power of Hyderabad also declined. Regarding the fate of Marathas, we have already discussed. Hyderabad. The state of Hyderabad was founded by Wazir Chin Kulich Khan himself, who was one of the leading nobles of the post-Aurangzeb era and had earlier played a key role in the overthrow of the Sayyidi brothers. However, frustrated by his failure and to reform the administration under Emperor Muhammad Shah, he relinquished his office of Waziriyat and in 1724 marched south to establish the state of Hyderabad in the Deccan and took the title of Nizam ul Mulk Asafja, similar on the lines of Murshid Quli Khan of Bengal. He never openly declared his independence from the Mughals, but acted more like a sovereign ruler who waged wars, concluded peace, conferred titles, and gave jagirs and offices without any reference to Delhi. He established an orderly administration in Deccan and successfully not only kept the defaulting zamindars in the line but also kept the powerful Marathas out of his dominion. However, after his death in 1748, the power of Hyderabad also declined and the state was not able to maintain its affairs independently. The control of the coastal districts was quickly lost, leaving the kingdom in economic loss. Mysore, originally a vice-royalty under Vijayanagara Empire in the 16th century. Mysore emerged as an important state under the rule of Wodeyar dynasty, such as Katni Rava, Narasa Raja, and Chikadev Raja. However, it reached its real period of glory under Hyder Ali, a cavalry commander of migrant origin, who assumed effective powers in the kingdom in 1761. When he took over the political powers in Mysore by ousting the corrupt Dalwai, that is the Prime Minister, Nanraj, who had in the meanwhile usurped real power in the state by reducing the Wodeyars to a meager figureheads. Hyder modernized his army with French expert and infused European discipline into the Mysore army, which was organized on a European model through the system of Raisals, with a clear chain of command going up to the top commander, that is Sultan himself. He and later his son Tipu Sultan around 1782 made attempt to consolidate Mysore and make it a kingdom with access to not one but both coasts of peninsular India. In fact, they were relatively successful against the Kodavas, the inhabitant of upland kingdom of Kodagu, that is Kurg, coastal Karnataka and northern Kerala, enabling Tipu to open diplomatic and commercial relations on his own with the Middle East. However, both Hyder and Tipu were always resisted by polygars, the local chiefs, the Marathas, and top of that, they also had to face formidable military adversary in the form of English East India Company. Their detailed rivalry culminating into Anglo-Mysore War will be discussed in the last chapter. Travancore, Martanda Varman, who ruled Travancore, So highlight the name of the ruler. Travancore के कौन थे? It was Martanda Varma, who ruled Travancore, southern Kerala state of Vinod from 1729 to 1758. Initiated many measures to strengthen his authority so as to build a substantial standing army, reducing the power of Nayars aristocracy on which the ruler of the area had earlier depended military and fortifying the northern limits of his kingdom at the so-called Travancore line. In order to limit European involvement in trade, he extended patronage to Assyrian Christian, a large trading community within his domain, and also organized a strong army on the western model with the help of European officers. He defeated the Dutch and ended their political power in Kerala. In order to further keep the trade under his watch, he declared many goods as royal monopoly items, requiring a license for trade, such as pepper. He also built roads, canals, and undertook many irrigation work. These policies were also continued by Martanda's successor Rama Varma, 1758 to 98, who was himself a poet, scholar, and a man of great knowledge. He conversed fluently in English, took keen interest in European affairs, and regularly read newspapers and journals published in London. The 18th century saw a remarkable revival in Malayalam literature, and Trivandrum, the capital of Travancore, became a famous centre of Sanskrit scholarship. However, around 1766, the kingdom of Travancore had to face invasion from Mysore, which affected the state of Hyder Ali, was able to annex northern Kerala up to Cochin. So now we are going to start with the 15th chapter, Bhakti and other important religious movement. An important landmark in the cultural history of the medieval India was the silent revolution in the society known as Bhakti movement. The term Bhakti symbolized devotion or passion, love for the divine. Its meaning has, however, evolved with time, along with the concept of Bhakti itself. Since the time of Indo-Aryans and the sacred texts, that is, the Vedas, the meaning of Bhakti as a tradition has varied. The Vedic period, with its focused image of rishis or the seers or visionary figures who was able to communicate with and about the various gods of the Vedic pantheons through a complex system of ritual, moksha, could be attained through a precise performance of these rituals, did contain the seed of Bhakti moment, but it was clearly not the true depiction. The process of adoration of a personal god started during the course of the 6th century BCE, with the rise of a heterodox movements of Buddhism and Jainism. For instance, under Mahayana Buddhism, the worship of Buddha started in his Avalokita, gracious form. The worship of Vishnu too started around the same time, which was popularized to a greater extent by the Gupta kings, who supported the pantheons of God, Vishnu, the cosmic king, Shiva, the great yogi and ascetic, and his feminine counterpart Shakti, or a divine energy. To the worship of divine image, puja, the Puranas, mythological composition about gods. The Gupta king also built temples dedicated to these gods and patronized various devotion. The Bhakti movement in South India. However, what is known today as the Bhakti movement had its genesis in southern India in the 7th and the 12th century CE. It was in South India that Bhakti grew from a religious tradition to a popular movement based on notions of religious equality and broad-based social participation. It is characterized by the writing of its poet saints, the Shivite Nayanaras and the Vaishnavite Alvars, who preached the Bhakti cult under Pallavas, Pandyas and the Cholas. They disregarded the austerities preached by the Jains and the Buddhists, along with rejecting the fatalistic and atheistic tradition, and preached that a personal devotion to God was the only means of salvation. They extolled passionate devotional love for the divine and stressed on the fact that moksha, liberation from the cycle of rebirth, could be attained not by following rules, regulations, or social order, but through simply devotion to the divine. It is pertinent to note that the composition of Alvars and Nayanaras at the time commanded equal significance as the Vedas. For instance, one of the anthologies of composition by the Alvars, the Nalaria Divya Prabandhan, was frequently described as the Tamil Veda. The Bhakti sect usually emerged from the lower caste, preached a religion which was non-ritualistic and open to all without any distinction of caste or creed, taught in local vernacular language, and encouraged women to join in the gatherings. For instance, the composition of Andal, a woman alvar, were quite popular with another woman. Karaikal Amyar was a devotee Nayanar who adopted the path of extreme asceticism. These ideas of bhakti were carried to the north by saints as well as by the scholars. However, the South Indian Bhakti movement had its limitation as it never consciously opposed Brahmanism or the Varna and the caste system at a social level. It was only emphasized on the idea that Bhakti as a mode of worship should be accessible to all, or it's provided an alternate avenue to worship of the Shudras while it continued to function within the social structure of the caste, and the lower caste continued to suffer from various social disabilities. In spite of emphasis on bhakti as the superior mode of worship, there was no elimination of Brahmanical rituals such as worship of idols, recitation of Vedic mantras, pilgrimage to the sacred places. In fact, the main targets were the Buddhists and Jains and not the Brahmanas, and this perhaps was the reason why Brahmana-dominated temple played an important role in the growth of South Indian Bhakti movement. The Bhakti movement in North India. The evolution of Bhakti movement in medieval India gained momentum in the northern part of the country during the 12th and the 17th century, but interestingly, it differed greatly from the southern Bhakti movement. The Bhakti movement in North included social-religious movement linked to one of the acharyas from the south. Hence, the Bhakti movement in North India is sometimes seen as continuation of the movement that originated in the south. For instance, like the South Indian Bhakti movement, Vaishnava Bhakti movement of North India, though egalitarian in the religious sphere, never denounced the caste system, the authority of Brahmanical scriptures, and the Brahmanical privileges as such. Despite similarities in the tradition of the two regions, the idea of bhakti varied in terms of the teaching of each of the saints. The northern medieval Bhakti movement was influenced by the spread of Islam in India. The significant characteristics of Islam was monotheism, or a belief in one God, equality and brotherhood of a man, and rejection of rituals and class division, greatly influenced the Bhakti movement of this era. Further, the preaching of Sufi teachers shaped the thinking of Bhakti reforms like Ramanand, Kabir and Nanak, as the Bhakti movement also led to certain reforms in the society. There are varied reasons behind the origin of Bhakti movement. Some scholars considered the rise of Bhakti movement as a reaction against feudal oppression and against conformist Rajput Brahmin dominations, as was evident in the anti-feudal tone in the poetry of some Bhakti saints like Kabir, Nanak, Chaitanya and Tulsidas. Another group of scholars, though, thought that the socio-economic changes in the early medieval period led to the emergence of this movement. According to them, during the 13th and the 14th century, the demand for manufactured goods, luxuries and other artisanal goods increased, leading to a movement of artisans into the cities. The movement gained support from these classes of the society as these groups were dissatisfied with the low status accorded to them by the Brahmanical system, and hence they turned towards Bhakti since it focused on equality. Though there was no single opinion about the origins of the Bhakti movement, there is unanimity of thoughts over the fact that Bhakti movement focused on the measure of equality and devotional surrenders to a personally conceived Supreme God. So in the next lecture, we'll start with the Bhakti movement and the division of Bhakti movement into Saguna and Nirguna, right? So that's all for the day. See you next time and keep on watching Ghatna Sutra.